Good afternoon. My name is Chris Konetsky, and I am the group publisher for Business Publications Corporation, which of course produces the Business Record. Welcome to our first event of the year, our 2024 Legislative Forecast. It's our goal to help you do business better. You all are the reason that we do what we do. And I know we've got a great panel lined up for you to help peer a little bit into the future and understand how this year's legislative session could affect your business. Before we get to our panel, I want to talk briefly about Business Record's role as it relates to politics. We are an apolitical business publication. We don't cover elections or endorse candidates. We work really diligently to make sure we take a nonpartisan and balanced approach to reporting on business issues, and in particular on policy that could be affecting the business community. That remains our goal with today's event. But of course, as we talk about legislative agendas, that's coming against a backdrop where there's always partisanship and rhetoric. We're going to do our best today, and our panel is going to work today to help you see and understand what types of things are going to come up. They're going to do that, they've promised me, with an air of civility during the conversation. The panelists might disagree. In fact, we encourage them beforehand to make sure they do if they feel like they have a differing opinion. But through the discussion, we know they'll keep it civil. And I want to thank our panelists and our audience in advance for helping model that today and into the future as we talk about how the legislative session could be affecting business. All right, we're going to get things going. Here's how it's going to work. In a moment, I'll introduce our two moderators today. We're going to get you introduced to our panelists. They're going to ask a few questions to get things going, but you all have a role to play as well, too. On the bottom of your screen, we're going to make the chat and Q&A function available. You can interact directly there. If you have questions, feel free to chat them in. We can't get to everything, but it does help us guide the conversation, so we'll look forward to seeing what types of things you're interested in learning about. It's my pleasure now to introduce you to two of our fantastic team members, Senior Staff Writer Michael Crum and our new Associate Editor, Mike Mendenhall. Michael Crum has covered economic development and policy for us and has moderated this event in the past few years. He's going to be transitioning into a new role with the Business Record, where he's going to be writing more and more about commercial real estate. And as such, our new associate editor, Mike, is going to be covering this area in the future. So you're covered with the mics here. Mike Mendenhall joined us about 2 months ago from the Jacksonville Daily Record, which is a business publication that's very similar in nature to the Business Record. He was also the associate editor there, and he covered government and policy along with economic development. He's an Iowa native and has more than 13 years of journalism experience, and we're glad to have done our part working on the talent challenge here in the state to bring a great talent back to the state. So we're welcoming him back here now. He's going to be the point of contact as we go through the legislature. He'll be the one that's navigating our coverage of that. The two mics are going to help guide the conversation today. I know you're going to be in good hands. We've only got less than an hour here, and so we'll barely be able to scratch the surface, I'm sure. But let's get things started. To kick things off, Michael Crum is going to intro the panel and ask the first question. Michael, go ahead and take it away.
All right, very good. Thanks, Chris, and thanks everyone for joining us today. We're here today to look at the legislative session and to help you get an idea about the issues, policy, and topics that could ultimately be addressed during this year's session. And we have a great panel to help us do that today. First of all, I'd like to introduce J.D. Davis, the Vice President of Public Policy for the Iowa Association of Business and Industry, Joe Murphy, the President of Iowa Business Council, Dustin Miller, the Executive Director of the Iowa Chamber Alliance, Dave Stone, the Advocacy Officer for the United Way of Central Iowa, and Mollie Ross, Vice President of Operations for the Technology Association of Iowa, and Andrea Woodard, the Senior Vice President of Government Relations and Public Policy at the Greater Des Moines Partnership. So let's go ahead and give them a warm welcome today, and you can do that in the chat if you'd like. Now, as I said, normally we do get if we're doing this in person, we'd get a rousing applause for all of them, but because we can't hear that, go ahead and say hello to them and to each other and welcome them in the chat function that Chris told you about earlier. So we do only have a little less than an hour to really try to delve as deep as we can into some of the topics that lawmakers will address that will have a potentially impact the business community moving forward. And one of those generally is always going to be, we're always going to be talking about workforce and how to grow the state's workforce and what different issues can impact that. So what I'd like to do is really just start with each panelist and really ask them the question, how best can lawmakers achieve that goal of building the state's workforce during the 2024 session? And JD, let's start with you.
Okay, Michael, thank you very much. JD Davis here with the Iowa Association of Business and Industry. 1,500 members statewide, every county. Very happy to count the business record of as one of our members, so we appreciate your support. Really getting at workforce. Our members, through a grassroots process, have identified workforce and broken it down into a few areas that have had highlights in past sessions and need to be continue to be focused upon. And that leads with childcare. We break childcare down into the affordability and the availability and the sustainability of childcare services. So each of those has been focused on in the past, and we think that continued focus is good. We are now seeing kind of the fruits of our labor with some of the challenge grants that businesses are receiving. We are seeing some styles of providing childcare moving throughout the state with business and public sector partnerships forming. That is something that gets an annual appropriation. We're going to want to make sure that we continue to support those successes. Last year, we also made sure that the reimbursement rates for childcare centers were a little better for the providers. We want to make sure that there are people there willing and able and in place to do those work. So we're going to make sure that we continue on that. Similarly, we've had some success on workforce housing, getting people living closer to where they work. We've seen awards this year that are going to translate into about 2,000 new dwellings for folks in Iowa. Those programs need to continue. So we're going to be advocating very much on that. We also have had a good record recently in how we're upskilling people. Programs, Future Ready Iowa and Last Dollar Scholarship and those things that are done there. We want to make sure that momentum that we have for co-locating all of our apprenticeship programs in one place remains. And that's a great boon to businesses, frankly, that just didn't know where to plug into government to figure out how to get people trained. And so now that's going. So we're going to try to continue to focus on those issues. And then finally, another one that really is working. Iowa has the great distinction of being the most adoptive of technology in the manufacturing processes. Manufacturing 4.0 is an initiative of the governor. We'd like to see some of those parameters of that program more model the federal level. We think that's really going to drive into our smallest manufacturers the tools they need to compete inside and outside of Iowa and around the world.
Thank you, JD. And you did a great job of kind of touching on several different topics that we are going to dig deeper into today. So I appreciate that. Let's bring Andrea into the conversation. Andrea, is there a single thing that the partnership is focusing on, or you think the business community should focus on during the session that lawmakers need to do to really help achieve the goal of workforce growth here in Iowa?
Thanks, Michael. Thanks, Mike and Chris, for having me and the Greater Des Moines Partnership represented on this great panel of colleagues. As an economic development and talent development organization, we are really leaning into those two pieces of our core mission. So the one I'll talk about maybe first is work-based learning. We're hopeful we'll hear more at the governor's condition of the state this evening on opportunities to give Iowa's high school students in particular, but students an opportunity to explore careers and connect with business so that they can see themselves staying here in Iowa beyond their high school years. And so whether it's through what JD was talking about with apprenticeships, there's opportunities for internship programs. We'll be looking to see what is proposed from the state during the legislative session. That's one of 5 priorities the partnership outlined, also similar to what JD said in their process at ABI. We had pulled together investors and members of the partnership throughout our 11 county footprint to say what is going to help us move the needle on workforce, right? Because that is and continues to remain the #1 issue we hear. So outside of the work-based learning, we'll talk about economic development in the mega program, childcare, housing, and placemaking. But I'll start with work-based learning as the one that we're looking forward to leaning into this legislative session.
And Dave, let's bring you into the conversation to get us started today. What should lawmakers focus on this session to help grow the state's workforce, in your opinion?
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Dave Stone, United Way of Central Iowa. Thank you to all of our panelists, as well as the Business Record for hosting this event today. United Way of Central Iowa serves the metro community, Dallas, Polk, and Warren counties, and our advocacy program focuses at the local, the state legislature, as well as the federal levels as well. Our approach is sort of an interconnected way. We're really looking at the foundational supports that we need to ensure that families thrive in our community. And this also in turn means the workforce. And so our top 3, we launched this in our legislative agenda in December. Our top 3 would be childcare, affordable housing, affordable workforce housing, and the growing need in areas such as food security for folks to be able to really afford the cost of nutritious, budgeted, healthy foods for their families.
Very good. Mollie?
Thanks, Michael. Thanks to everyone at the Business Record for inviting me and Technology Association of Iowa to take part on this panel. At TAI, we represent over 350 members statewide, technology companies, but we believe every company is a technology company and really focus our efforts through the technology lens at the State House. I have to echo what many has been said already. There is going to be no one silver bullet to solve our workforce issue, but I'll, in essence of differentiating a little bit, one of the ways that we look at talent attraction is ensuring that we have supports for entrepreneurship in the state, like those provided through IEDA, ensuring that founders and companies want to headquarter here in Iowa. We know that startups may start small, but can grow quickly and can grow with incredibly attractive job opportunities for talent to move here to Iowa, especially when we look at highly skilled and often young talent that we want to keep here in Iowa. And we know that in the technology and the software space specifically, that can grow quickly and provide a lot of opportunity across our state.
And Dustin.
Thanks, Michael, and hopefully everybody can hear me. As you can tell, I did make it indoors. Need a little more salt on the road, but I made it to the Capitol today, so hopefully you can hear me. But I greatly appreciate presenting and with this group with all great reputations across the board from various different groups. I think one of the things that I kind of anticipated, especially from JD, and I know he'll echo this and Joe will as well, but one of the things that when we come to talent attraction that's extremely important is just where our business climate is headed from a tax standpoint, moving from a high rate, highly complex system. While Mollie mentioned as well, there's no one single silver bullet. I think one of the omissions we had here is this business climate moving that direction is a better opportunity for people to grow wealth in the state. But talent attraction has been one of our #1 issues since 2019. Didn't realize that, and it's obviously been on everybody's agenda over the past few years. We threw it to the top of our agenda in 2019 is what I mean by that. And ultimately, we didn't realize what would happen in 2020 to exacerbate that. It sounds like when I go around the state that some of those really horrible days of finding employees are somewhat, placated and behind us, but still very, very, a big need in the state from a talent attraction standpoint. So one of the things, as JD mentioned, workforce housing tax credits, childcare, which was something that there was a real reluctance on behalf of legislators, where early on it was seen as a social service. I think really people understand that that's an employment issue. But two things that I think really need to be mentioned is this concept of placemaking, of making places where people want to live, work, and play. So we appreciated last year, kind of creating a stable set of funding for Destination Iowa, meaning people having money to build local, authentic projects that make young people attracted to these places. But then also one of the things that I mentioned as we all talked was last year, Iowa Economic Development Authority pushed something called mega sites, large scale, multi-billion-dollar investments. The kind of investments we see kind of in the marketplace in this state are agribusiness related, are value add related to agricultural projects, and multi-billion dollars. And we think some of those are transformational for the state and attract new investment. So those are some of the things we'll be looking for this session.
Joe, let's have you talk a little bit about what you think lawmakers need to focus on when it comes to workforce development and attraction during the 2024 session.
Thanks, Michael. Great to be with everybody today. Really appreciate the opportunity to participate in this. The Iowa Business Council represents some of Iowa's largest companies all across the state, a statewide organization. And workforce and these issues have long been at the top of our list, as it has been for all of these other organizations on the call, but really want to dive into something that Andrea mentioned earlier in work-based learning. This is something that's fundamental to our ability to recruit homegrown talent in our state. And there are so many opportunities across Iowa to bring people into the workforce or into a workforce exploration opportunity. And when we think about work-based learning, we really want to focus on three primary areas. That would be registered apprenticeship programs at the high school level, quality pre-apprenticeship programs, and then lastly, high school internship programs. The goal of work-based learning really should be at the end of that experience that there's a hire at the end of that. We know when we're talking about registered apprenticeship programs that 92% of those registered apprentices, when they graduate from that program, are retained within their company at the end of 5 years at a 92% level. That's an incredible statistics to think about when we're trying to not only recruit people into our state, but retain people into our state. So providing those opportunities at a scalable way, in a rigorous way that allows for that career exploration with an opportunity to hire somebody at the end of that process, I think is really important. As Andrea mentioned, we look forward to the governor discussing that this evening.
Well, let's delve into some other questions. Several of you have touched on work-based learning and apprenticeship programs. So I'm going to want to spend a little more time kind of delving into that a little bit deeper. Andrea, you and I have talked a little bit about this previously leading up to this session. Can you give us maybe and give our audience maybe just a quick history lesson about what's happened the past couple of sessions and what's gotten us to this point and what investments have happened? And what do you see the emphasis needing to be here in 2024 as far as where those investments can be furthered in maybe some programs that have been underway for a while?
I'll do my best, and we'll lean on others who have been doing just as much, if not more, in this space. We, as has been mentioned, the apprenticeship agency was created last session, and I think Joe does a nice job of breaking it down. You've got your registered apprenticeship programs, your pre-apprenticeship, your internship programs. So kind of looking at those three buckets, a huge step forward with the apprenticeship agency, and as JD mentioned, a one-stop shop for industry looking to engage in how to plug people into the workforce through registered apprenticeships. Workforce Ready Iowa, or excuse me, Future Ready Iowa that JD mentioned is another program that has continued to see increased investment over the years. And I think both of those pushes have been some successes. I'm sure others can mention some more. One of the, we're also hearing as our team with the introduction of our new president and CEO this summer, Tiffany embarked on an 11 county listening tour, and we're hearing more and more about different challenges that may exist throughout our footprint and beyond. One of them that we're learning more about is there's internship programs that high school students can currently get it's federal money to support those internship programs. However, it can only be drawn down during the 180 school year. And so how do we make some of those policy changes to expand existing programs, existing opportunities, and kind of reduce those barriers that might be there for students? So I'll use that as one of the examples that we're maybe looking to hear more about tonight and in the coming days of the session.
And JD, where do you see further investment needed in some of those programs that Andrea just described, or maybe other programs that people are looking at to help grow talent here in Iowa? You're on mute, JD.
Sorry there. One thing I'd like to highlight is the school-based learning, work-based learning piece. A couple of years ago, we passed legislation that enabled folks that are not on the education side of the equation on learning and training to be in charge of these programs in businesses. Frankly, the guidance counselors and others can just get too taxed by all their other issues they have to attend to, and that allows a greater amount of opportunities to get these stood up in school districts. We also ask that all the school districts report whether or not they have these types of programs going. So at ABI, it's our expectation we will be matching employers with school districts that need to stand up these programs so that we can get more training going on. There's an example down in the Quad Cities. The community college lost their welding instructor, and that was a devastation because that person trained so many welders that were going into businesses there. If we can do some more business side training of that type of things, that we don't have to worry about replacing that. The good news is welders make more than you can pay them to teach welding. And so that was the reason why that was not filled. But I really think getting the training onto the shop floor, getting the apprenticeship programs that are, we have more apprenticeship programs in Iowa than any other state, as we get into very narrow ways that we are developing apprenticeships for very narrow niche needs. So we have momentum. So 2024, we need to make sure we keep things going. Tweaks are fine, but I think the message is we are seeing some great successes that we need to make sure that we're continuing.
And Joe, let's bring you into the conversation here. What areas, when it comes to work-based learning or job training, would you like to see the legislature focus on this session?
I think, as JD mentioned, Iowa's in a lot of ways leading the nation in registered apprenticeship programs, and we have a goal at the Business Council of having all 22 of our members have at least one registered apprenticeship program at some point over the next 12 months. And so, while that's an ambitious goal, we currently have 9 that have already signed up. We think that we can continue to lead and do better on that front. But it takes that partnership between the business and the community school district or the high school. And so I think when you look at the opportunity that's there to provide job exploration to students, I think registered apprenticeship programs is really the premier model, but it's not going to work for every single company. And so we have to be open to, like I said earlier, to quality pre-apprenticeship programs that could then stack into a registered apprenticeship program or a 2-year or 4-year degree, or a high school internship opportunity where that high school junior or senior can start their career pathway with the company right away in high school, matriculate into a 4-year or 2-year institution, continue that internship, and then once they graduate, come into that company as a full-time hire. And so I think, again, looking at those three primary driver job opportunities would be the three areas that the Iowa Business Council would focus on. But that's not to dismiss sort of the top of the funnel beginning sort of programs that we look at to try to get kids interested in things, whether they be career fairs or job shadows or things like that. That's very important, maybe at that K-7 level. But once we get into high school, we really need to be driving towards more of a standardized approach, I think, to career readiness and career development.
Let's go ahead and shift topics a little bit. I'm going to let Mike Mendenhall ask the next question. So take it away, Mike.
Thank you, Michael, and thank you again to our very knowledgeable panel for joining us today. Like Michael said, I want to shift gears and want to dive a little bit deeper into tax policy. It's been said that tax policy is a growth strategy. And I want to go back to Joe Murphy here. Joe, do you think lawmakers will be successful in further achieving goals of reducing the state's individual income tax this year? It's been alluded to by several lawmakers that possibly they possibly want to speed up the transition to a 3.9% flat tax. And if so, can you explain to us how that might make Iowa more competitive?
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity, Mike, to discuss this. And I do think that there's going to be at minimum an acceleration getting towards that 3.9% individual rate, and then possibly an acceleration on the corporate side as well. We're marching towards a 5.5% flat tax on the corporate rate. The most important thing about that is that there's very specific guardrails or performance standards that the state must achieve in order for that corporate tax rate to decline. And I'm happy to say and report that we continue to eclipse that very high bar each and every year since that was passed. But I do think that there's a really great opportunity there to make our tax structure more competitive and at a more accelerated rate. The financial health of our state is very significant right now. If you just look through the numbers by the Revenue Estimating Conference, we have $9.75 billion in expected revenue for fiscal year 24. That's the current fiscal year that we're in. $9.64 billion in expected revenue in the following fiscal year. That's an incredible amount of revenue coming into the state that affords policymakers from the governor on down to figure out what they want to do. And they've made it clear that they want to continue to address tax policy in a very prudent and responsible way. And I think that that's a really important point to make. We've had a really long way to go in Iowa. It was just, I think, 3 years ago that Iowa's corporate tax rate ranked 50th out of 50 in the nation. The individual rates were not much better. And so we've made steady progress on that. And I think it's important to keep up that momentum, but do so in a responsible way in order to make sure that we have the capital and the resources still needed or still required to fund essential government services that Iowans and families depend on each and every day. And I think that there's a way to do that. And I think the fiscal health of Iowa enables that future reality.
Thanks for that answer, Joe. Dave, I'd like to send that question to you as well. I mean, do you think that the legislature will be successful this year in reducing the state's individual income tax more quickly? And just from your perspective, does that make Iowa a more competitive state? And are there other areas of taxation that you might be looking at this session for legislators to address?
Well, thanks for that question. The current schedule, as Joe was mentioning, they are on track to continue to change the tax rates. Really from our perspective, the key thing is making sure that we do have enough of those critical funds to support those lowest income Iowans in our state. We recently updated our asset limited income constrained report and employed report, otherwise known as ALICE, and still across the state, nearly 37% families can't really meet ends meet with their current earnings. And so we need to make sure that we have the supports necessary for those families to be able to thrive, to be able to upskill, to be able to attend an education or a training program, to be able to get that next higher paying job. Childcare remains one of the key hurdles there. And, one of the more innovative approaches, we absolutely appreciate the work that the legislature did last year on increasing the childcare assistance eligibility for families, as well as the reimbursement rates for the providers. But we still have sort of this economics problem in the childcare ecosystem, and that would mainly be the workforce side. And so one of the more innovative approaches that we think that we could look at this next session is, why not provide all childcare providers in the state a state income tax break, at least exempt them from those. Depending on family size, makeup, what have you, there may be some taxable income for some of these folks. Just want to give you, and everyone who's participating and listening, childcare providers are some of the lowest paid employees of any job classification in the state. And we're really looking for ways to make that industry professional and more competitive versus fast casual or logistics companies or retail, especially considering childcare is very difficult, hard work, especially 5 days a week, taking care of a number of kiddos. And if there aren't lucrative opportunities for them to remain in the profession and stay there, that's the key. We'll keep losing folks. And so a state-based income tax break could get them a couple extra dollars an hour at the end of the year. Creates no pressure on centers to increase revenues, which is just passed on to families. And this is not really an appropriation request. It's a requesting the state not collect dollars. So, very specifically looking at that sort of issue of, hey, childcare is that super critical issue that we really need to address, and we'll need to look at it every single year in this current environment. Let's do some really innovative approaches to make sure that we're supporting that specific type of the workforce.
All right, Dustin, that tax question to you as well, and maybe could you also address to the corporate income tax that reduction is supposed to be triggered by the tax law that was passed in 2022, and kind of how talk about what you're expecting the legislature to do to address tax policy in the coming session.
Yeah, I appreciate the question. I don't want to replow ground that Joe's already covered, but I mean, as he mentioned, there's billions of dollars in various accounts, and we saw a pretty massive surplus this year. So I agree with Joe that I think especially on the personal income tax side, an acceleration of the time frame of the step down on that, and certainly a look at the corporate side. What I would say, and I mentioned it before, is it's an extremely favorable scenario for us to go from a high rate, highly complex system to a lower rate, simplified system. And one of the things from a Chamber Alliance perspective, the reason that is so valuable is we used to not even be on the playing field for certain business attraction with site selectors. Because as Joe mentioned, we had the worst corporate rate in the country. And so certain people would never locate here. While tax isn't the sole factor in location or expansion or retention, it is a factor. And so it's one of those things, talent attraction and business attraction, tax climate is one of those components. And all of a sudden Iowa, with the direction we're heading, and potential buy down and potential even lowering the rates, that creates a much more favorable business environment for people to make investments in. One of the things that we will be watching for is, certainly there seems to be an interest in a potentially moving towards a no income tax in the state. And there's certain tools that just have to be there, even if you're competing with economic development deals in Texas and Florida, there are still economic development tools that need to be there to tip the scales to land deals. So, and also community college funding, 26E and F is done through an income tax tool. So those are the things that we want to make sure that don't get left off the table if that scenario happens.
Thank you very much. Want to shift gears here and shift topics and move to Andrea, actually, and want to talk a little bit about major economic development projects. Another measure that's expected to be taken up this session is known as the MEGA, which is the Major Economic Growth Attraction Program, or its incentives for large projects that can help move the needle on the state's economy. So, Andrea, how could this play a factor in workforce development and making the state more competitive?
Sure, thank you. As an economic development organization in an 11 county region, we might not always have a site that's eligible for this large of a project, but the beauty of it is it gives another tool into the toolbox for our state in order to attract new business, and that then frees up some of the resources for some of the other programs that we work with our partners to provide to those business expansions or new businesses coming into the region. And so the MEGA program would again just provide an additional tool in that toolbox to ensure that we are attracting new business. And as was just mentioned, how do we then, it gives us an opportunity to compete more on a national scale for some of those incredibly larger projects that we know are out there and in the pipeline.
JD, also on the mega project or the mega incentives, the legislature attempted to pass that bill last session and didn't quite make it through. But what kind of changes are you expecting the legislature to make on that bill in order to get it through?
Yeah, just as a reminder, that bill passed the Senate with only 2 no votes a year ago. It's ready for House consideration now. Those of us that check our feeds all the time see that Speaker Grassley has weighed in today with the announcement that he'd like to see some freedom sites developed as well, which is his idea that rural Iowa needs to have the same kind of focus that he believes the mega site deal is, although I'm aware of mega sites that are in rural Iowa for development. An organization like ABI is interested in this primarily from the fact that all the secondary business that comes along with the attraction of one business to an area, you're going to have all sorts of people that are in the supply chain for the things that are working there and doing that. I think that this ties in with our tax talk we just had. As we get flat taxes and lower taxes, some of the things that we use to entice businesses were credits and things that we did to the tax system that we already had. And so it's nice to see us in a place now where we can where tax policy is kind of off the table and we work on some of the other incentives that can be delivered. But I do think that to get this passed, you're going to see some massaging in the House to make sure that the benefits are other places. One thing that ABI will weigh in on is to make sure that we're not just going around the state and identifying places where people we haven't met yet to attract are getting a tax structure or business structure that's not available to the folks that have been pulling the cart for so long. So we have to make sure we balance that. But some of the things that the speaker is talking about are moving businesses here. So if we're talking about what does it take to pick up a business and bring it to Iowa, what does it take to pick up their workforce and offer them a place to come to Iowa, that's great for everybody. And we can talk about those things. So here we are, day 2. It's kind of exciting that that on the mega site where, many issues that we'll be dealing with have had no mention so far in just 2 days, but the mega site bill from one of the Speaker of the House clearly last year had some reservations. This year he's leaning in. So I think that bodes well, and we'll all get working on it. Everybody on this panel will be pushing hard.
And Mike, if I could politely weigh in.
Yeah, please jump in.
One thing to add to JD's there is he's 100% right. One of the deals that was on the table that left for Tulsa, that a lot of people know about, is there was a project in Ames that had it combined 3,000 potential jobs. And to JD's point, the jobs for the manufacturer themselves was about 1,500. And then there were 2 side businesses, 2 new side manufacturers that serviced the main project. And to JD's point, 3,000 jobs with people struggling to find people, 3,000 jobs in the Ames and Des Moines community is scary. However, these are the kind of multi-billion-dollar transformational jobs that, as JD mentioned, these are not onesies, twosies. These are multi-billion-dollar investments that we're trying to land. And with the opportunities from the Inflation Reduction Act and things like that, there are just opportunities that are presenting themselves that are really transformational for the state. And one other small thing is, what got caught up in the House too was the foreign land ownership language. I would anticipate some restructuring in the House related to that. As JD, Joe, and everybody on here on the call would realize, Iowa is a small state. In order to do a large scale investment, you have to attract capital. And sometimes that capital doesn't come from the state. Sometimes it doesn't come from this country. So you just have to, but it's also important to understand that there's a lot of great companies around the state that are not owned by U.S. and still make pretty heavy investments in our state. So I anticipate some more guardrails around that foreign land ownership. But as JD rightly mentioned, I think there's more of a push from the House to get this across the finish line this year.
Great. All right. Thanks for the insight on that. And I'll kick it back to Michael.
All right. Thanks, Mike. And thanks everyone for your participation and your insight so far. Mollie, I'd like to bring you into the conversation. First, I'd like to give you an opportunity to address anything, whether it's the tax question or the mega program question that we've asked so far, before I move on and specifically address some technology things to you.
Thank you, Michael. And yes, I am fortunate to have so many knowledgeable peers in the tax and infrastructure space. This is not a space that we engage in deeply, although I will say when we talk about development, infrastructure is huge for our membership as well, from pipes in the ground to everything needed to operate a facility. So it's an area that we certainly support and appreciate everybody's knowledge and digging into the details here on this panel.
So specifically when it comes to technology, what are the focuses of the Technology Association of Iowa as far as cybersecurity or other issues? Where do you think you might see the needle moved this session to help along those fronts?
Yeah, thank you. Absolutely. I think, just like in our daily lives, technology and conversations around technology are ever more pervasive in the State House as well. Cybersecurity is certainly an important topic. Hopefully it's an important topic for all the business leaders on this call today. It's one of those things that is unfortunately ever growing, or the threat is ever growing. Our legislature made large strides last year. We were really appreciative to see a couple of bills passed, one just making ransomware illegal in the state of Iowa. That's one of the things that we look at is oftentimes, trying to play catch up with technology and unfortunately with the bad actors in technology as well. So I appreciate that our legislature has been on the front end of that. Last year, making us only the 6th state in the nation to have data privacy protections for Iowans. And I think that those conversations are going to continue. In cybersecurity specifically, I think we're going to continue to talk about education and training, making sure that companies across the state are kept aware and resources are available to train their team members and to hire consultants if necessary, to ensure that the resources are available to strengthen their cybersecurity practices, and hopefully from the state provide incentives to do so. It's another thing that we worked on last year is ensuring that there are protections for companies who are trying to practice safe cybersecurity practices. That's something that's going to benefit truly every Iowan, whether it's the company you work for or a company you do business with. The more protection, the better. And then also ensure that we have the resources when something bad does happen, that we're ready. It's not only for business, but also on the state side for municipalities and education school systems. We know the state agencies do a lot of really good work to try to stay away or stay ahead of the bad actors, ensure that training and resources are available. And really, we're going to continue to work with the office, the CIO, and the Department of Management to help ensure that they have the resources available to continue to do so.
And Mollie, I'm curious, over the past really year and 18 months or so, the topic of AI has you can't turn on the TV, pick up a publication, look online without hearing people talking about AI. Do you see the legislature at all taking up any sort of AI legislation or trying to get involved in that conversation?
You're right. AI is everywhere, and I think part of every conversation, and that includes every state house, it seems. I don't think Iowa's state house, I don't think our legislature is going to avoid the conversation by any means. Whether there's going to be any bill movement is yet to be seen. I know there are conversations being had. From our perspective, I think the important thing is really understanding that we can all be operating from, a place of understanding. A lot of the conversation around AI is so fear-based, especially in the media, and talking about taking jobs and taking over the world, frankly. Certainly the generative AI and some of these large language models are new, but AI as a whole has been around for a long time. Companies across Iowa have been benefiting from technologies like AI for a long time. I think it's really important that we all start from a place of understanding and can lean into the value that AI brings and the potential to our state, especially when we're talking about things like a workforce shortage. There's potential for technology to continue to fill those gaps where we can't find people. I've looked to conversations around, like, we don't know if there's going to be legislation coming, but starting at a point of definition is where we're at, and hoping to continue to have conversations with our legislators and work with our members, frankly, and the technology executives who are using technologies like AI, and in many cases developing technologies like AI, to help come to a place of understanding before we try to make any sweeping change.
All right, very good. Anybody else want to offer a comment on
Yeah,
technology issues or AI, JD?
yeah, please, and thank you. And Mollie, thank you, and thank you, the Technology Association, for your focus on AI and on the cybersecurity. It's been important over the last couple of years. I think it's worth noting that over the interim, we've had some informal gatherings on AI, and groups like this. And the first assumption might have been this is now going to be everybody recounting their concerns about AI, and really, my eyes were opened when I went to our national partners, the National Association of Manufacturers, who had already polled their membership. What is AI, enrolled for your companies? And really, there was a frustration. There weren't enough people to hire to help them internally with AI. They were really wanting to find out what are the potentials that they could look at, how they can compare themselves against their competitors with using AI. Businesses are looking at AI as a tool and getting themselves better, more productive. There's a government role to make sure nothing gets out of control, but the businesses are trying to figure out how to use what's new to improve themselves, and so that's going to be a message that we will take to the Capitol if anything is considered this year. So, Mollie, thank you to your group for leading that.
Yeah, Michael, and I'd weigh in. I mean, JD just represented the fact. I mean, this kind of goes back to the registered apprentice discussion on the high school learning. What you find in this group is, I lean on JD for certain topics. I lean on Andrew. I lean on Joe. So this is one of those examples where, as business groups, we rely on the experts in this space. So yeah, I agree with JD. Appreciate Mollie and ITA's focus on issues like that where we don't have the expertise.
So looking at the clock, believe it or not, we only really have a few minutes left to begin wrapping things up and before we go to final thoughts. But I'd like to jump back to Dave quickly. I know one of the United Way of Central Iowa's priorities or areas of focus will also be food security. And I'd like you to touch on that a little bit, because again, food insecurity continues to rise here in Iowa to record levels. And we see reports on almost a monthly basis from groups like the Food Bank of Iowa and DMARC and its pantry system about the severity of the problem. Can you very briefly try to describe what you would like to see the legislature do, or what the legislature could do to help provide more resources to address food insecurity?
Well, thank you for that question, Michael. Food insecurity, as you've reported at the Business Record, is a growing problem. And we're getting to a point in the food security system, as you mentioned, the Food Bank of Iowa, as well as DMARC food pantries, where meeting the need is going to be quickly growing unsustainable, meaning that donations and dollars raised, at some point, there just won't be enough food for those who really line up for it. And so we've been working on food security issues for years now, but the pandemic has really exacerbated that. Food costs are higher, inflation is higher. Nutritious items like fresh fruits, produce, and vegetables are always some of the most expensive items in the grocery store. As well as we did also see the reduction in SNAP benefits or Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program benefits for families who were eligible, just less dollars in their pockets in terms of being able to meet that household budget for food. You know, a couple things the legislature could do immediately is just influxes of cash, just an appropriation for overall food security system. That would be the banks and the pantries. But also one of our specific issues we've been looking at is the Double Up Food Bucks program of Iowa's Healthiest State Initiative, something that we have invested in for a number of years and would love to see. For those families that participate in SNAP and shop at a participating grocery store, farmer's market, or co-op, and there's many across the state, they can stretch their benefits by when they purchase fresh fruits, vegetables, by being matched by up to $20 in credit, basically, for their next purchase. And that is a specific program that we would love to see funded by the legislature to pandemic levels. So we had expanded quite a bit and then had to contract with the loss of funding. And again, kiddos aren't ready to learn if they're hungry. Your employees are not going to be as productive if they're struggling to, meet the needs of their family, themselves. And hunger is an everyday problem. It's like showering. You're hungry today, you're going to be hungry tomorrow. There is no sort of pushing off that issue. And so food security remains something that we really look at, and a couple different things that the legislature could really address through influxes of cash.
All right, very good. And I'm going to try to squeeze in one more quick question here, and this is going to be to Andrea. Let's talk a little bit about workforce housing and affordable housing and the need for that as a tool to attract and retain talent here in Iowa. What investments are you monitoring or hope to monitor during the session this year along those lines?
Yeah, good question. I mentioned our 11-county listening tour, and the 4 top issues that we heard over and over were workforce, education, childcare, and housing. And housing, I think, is something many of us have worked on. Our big push will be to support an increase in the workforce housing tax credit program, an overall investment in the program, as well as an increase in the individual cost per unit cap. I think that's one way. Certainly we'll be following any other housing proposals that are filed and moved forward in the legislative process, but that's where we'll be focusing our time this year.
All right, very good. Well, I'm going to send it back to Chris now for some final notes and comments, and then all of your final thoughts. Chris, sending it back to you.
All right, we're just about out of time, but we're going to give the panelists a chance to give a closing thought, maybe something to look forward to in the legislature yet still to come. So panelists, get your final closing thought ready to go. So maybe something we didn't touch on today. That's always a great way to leave folks to end the program. So I want to share a couple quick things with everybody so that you have an idea of some things that are coming up. If you enjoyed today's event, we do have a number of things on the schedule in the weeks to come and throughout the year, but our next main event that we have is our economic forecast. That's going to be on Wednesday, January 24th. It's our annual sold out economic forecast luncheon. It's going to be up in Ankeny this year at the FFA Enrichment Center. We've got a great group of panelists, including Debbie Durham and a number of other folks as well, and economists from around the state that will help us get a little bit of a look into the future of what we can expect from the economy this year. Then on Thursday, February 15th, we're going to convene our first Power Breakfast of the year. That's going to be at the Des Moines Heritage Center here in downtown. We're going to be talking a little bit about banking and lending and taking a look at what that changing environment means for you and your business so that you can have a better understanding of what the lending climate looks like as we go forward. Obviously, there's been a lot of changes in that space. Interest rates have been up, so we'll see what that means for the banking industry here in the state. If you have any feedback on today's event, if you have story ideas, things that you think we should be covering in the future as we go through covering legislature or anything that is affecting your business, please feel free to reach out. Mike Mendenhall, our associate editor, will be the first point of contact for you. If he's not the right person, he'll make sure to get you in touch with the right reporter as well. The event from today, the team is going to use this information not only to help guide what their coverage looks like in the future. We'll have video of this available on our website tomorrow. We'll include some coverage in our daily e-newsletter and in our weekly print product as well. So you can look forward to seeing a summary of today's discussion if you'd like to share that out with folks in your office. I think that's what we've got. Let's go ahead and do our final wrap. So Andrea, I'm going to go ahead and start with you.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks again to the Business Record, and good to see all of you on today's panel. I'll just mention that, while we identify 5 top priorities, we have an agenda that those are not the only 5 issues that we're going to be working on. And as was also mentioned, this group here, we have a lot of synergies between each other, and how we can work together is how we're going to be most successful up at the Capitol. So perhaps, I know, Chris, you always encourage us to have dialogue, maybe disagree here and there, but the reality is we all work really well together and work together on issues, that common issues throughout session. And so we'll continue to do that. But looking forward to the rest of the legislative session, working with all of you and focusing on those 5 issues of placemaking, childcare, housing, work-based learning, and economic development for the partnership.
All right, Dave, your thoughts.
Well, thank you to my fellow panelists, and again to the Business Record for having me today. Like Andrea, we have a very aggressive agenda that we post. You can visit that at our website at unitedwaydm.org/advocate. Our big ones are childcare, workforce issues, affordable housing, as well as food security. And one that we didn't get to talk about in affordable housing is, in addition to the workforce housing tax credits, we're really looking to also get some movement on eviction expungement. We were able to pass that through the House last year. Would love to see the Senate take that up, because currently there is just no remedy in law for a tenant who was through no fault of their own, or their case was dismissed, in order to have an eviction proceeding removed from their record, even though things like bankruptcy or others would fall after 7 years. And so for our tenants and renters out there, which are oftentimes our frontline employees, we need to be able to make sure that they have safe, affordable housing and are able to get that. So thank you all again.
Thanks so much, Dave. JD?
Well, thank you, Chris. In the spirit of your question, what is it we might not have covered today? ABI's priorities for this session are workforce, which we covered, taxes, which we covered, but the third is regulatory reform. And I just would point out that there's been a national study released in the last 2 months that the cost now in Iowa for a small business, regulatory costs of government, $50,000 per employee. So that has got the attention of our membership, and we're going to be working to make sure that we can find those things that relieve the regulatory burden in Iowa.
Great. Thanks, JD. Joe?
Thanks, Chris. Really appreciate the opportunity to share some of our thoughts today. And one thing that we didn't mention that I definitely wanted to get across today, and when we're talking about workforce, or some of these social infrastructure pieces that we talked a lot about already, like childcare and housing, but the one piece that we didn't touch on was mental health. And the Iowa Business Council has been proud to support mental health initiatives and elevating that topic to our top level legislative priorities from last year and into this year. And so we look forward to working with a variety of nonprofit stakeholders and others and talking about this issue in a way that provides a new lens of focus on the economic realities and the productivity realities that are associated with mental health, and look forward to continuing to work on that issue. It's definitely an issue that impacts everybody on this webinar today and everybody in our state. And we're proud to elevate the mental health aspects to our legislative agenda this year.
Thanks, Joe. Mollie?
Thanks, Chris, and thanks to the Business Record again for putting this panel together. I always enjoy hearing from all of my colleagues in this space. As we think about all the conversations we've had today, a lot of really important topics, I would just encourage that we all continue to collaborate, think creatively, be open, both our legislature and everyone on this call today. We have a lot of things going good for us. There's a lot of work to be done, and we're all better together. The technology industry is known for disruption. there's a saying that what got us here won't get us where we're going. We're in a really good spot. I think that in order to get us where we're going, it's imperative that we all work together and think creatively. Don't be afraid to try something new. I think there's a lot of opportunity for Iowa to grow. I think technology will be a key player in that and hopefully helping solve some of the problems or some of the issues that we discussed today. Certainly for everyone watching the call, I'm sure many of you are members of at least one of the organizations represented here today, if not multiple. So I'd encourage everyone to reach out, share your feedback, share your ideas, and see how we can move forward together.
Thank you, Molly. And Dustin, wrap us up.
In the spirit of brevity, I should learn my lessons from people with great lineage like JD, and with words like who's pulling the horse cart that I learned today. I enjoyed that. But what I would say is I hope to see less than 100 days for the legislature this year with a lot of discussion about taxes. So that's what I look forward to.
Well, thanks, Dustin. We appreciate it. And thanks to all our panelists. I want to thank our audience for attending today and spending time learning with us about what's on the docket for the legislative session. A few years ago, we decided we needed to spend and be a little bit more intentional in this space, making sure we were covering the agendas from our business organizations and hosting events like this. So as a locally owned business, we're working hard to navigate, and we'll be watching the legislature as well. Our goal is to help businesses do business better. You hear me say that all the time, and you can help ensure us do that. Sponsorships and advertising do help make what we do possible. And so if you are interested in that, feel free to reach out my way. If you're not already a member of the Business Record, we'd of course encourage you to become a member, subscribe so you can continue to attend events like this, but also so that you can get access to some of the stories that we're reporting on a weekly basis as well. We know that you've got plenty of times and ways to spend your time. And today, we're just grateful that you spent it with us, looking ahead to the future, preparing yourself and your business to help navigate through what's going to come in the year ahead. So that concludes today's program. I want to thank again Mike and Michael, both for helping put together such a great panel, and our panelists for being with us today and help give us a little bit of a peek what's to come. So thank you again, and have a great afternoon.